Thank you for joining us. We are going to talk today about Sitecore's acquisition of Commerceserver.net. Today with us, we have President and Principal Analyst Scott Liewehr of Digital Clarity Group, and as well as Partner and Principal Analyst Tim Walters, also of Digital Clarity Group. So I'll pass it over to you guys. Go ahead.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for joining this afternoon. This is our second time at this. We wanted to make sure that we held a webinar here for the European audience as well. So we want to talk today about this Sitecore acquisition here of Commerceserver. And so I thought what we'd talk about, we'll just make this more of a dialogue between Tim and I. I think that's the conversational mode is good. So there's not a whole lot to look at here other than our mugs there on the slides. But here's what we'll talk about. So first we'll give you a little bit of background on the acquisition itself and about the players. Then we'll talk a little bit about kind of what it means for both of these vendors in our opinion, you know, their competition and their ecosystem of their customers as well. Tim will talk about also what it means from the general CEM space, from the customer experience management space, other service providers in the area, in the realm. And then we'll talk a little bit about maybe some future predictions and some interesting points to note as well. So thought I'd get started here. Let me talk a little bit about the background. So Sitecore acquired Commerceserver.net from Smith, which was renamed not very long ago from Ascentium. It's a digital agency in the space, and it was acquired for an undisclosed price. Commerceserver.net was originally known, you might have known this as Microsoft Commerce Server 2000, back when it was launched to replace Siteserver, and it was essentially orphaned by Microsoft back and sold off to Ascentium, who is now Smith is based in Ottawa, Canada. So the latest release is Commerceserver 10, and it was released about December of last year. Sitecore, on the other side, is a Copenhagen-based web content management turned CXM vendor, if we want to use that term. Considered by many to be a leader. It certainly is a leader if we talk about the kind of the buzz about it. They're definitely in an awful lot of deals that we see from our perspective. So Tim, I think we should probably just start this off by kind of giving everybody our thoughts right out of the gate. Is this a good thing, bad thing? What's your thoughts here?
Yeah, thanks, Scott, and welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to be talking again about this combination of Sitecore and Commerceserver. So in terms of the call, you know, we prefer not to look at this in terms of good or bad, or black or white, or positive or negative, because, you know, simply there are always positive and negative aspects to any merger and acquisition. Somebody's going to lose, even if it's only the competition who are now having to struggle against a much more powerful combination. So although it's impossible to tell how this is really going to turn out in the long run, in this case, Scott and I think that the positive clearly outnumber and outweigh the negatives. And we'll try to give you some indications of why that is the case in the next few minutes. So first, let me just provide a bit of context about, you know, what's driving this. Why would Sitecore want to acquire a commerce platform? And what's the value of it for them and for the market? So you've probably heard a lot about content and commerce, or Brian Walker wrote a famous piece called the Content Commerce Conundrum. And the fact is that enhancing a commerce site, and I say commerce site rather than e-commerce because I think it's redundant, a commerce site with what is broadly speaking called non-catalog content usually should make that site more engaging, more compelling, and ultimately result in more conversions and better results for the commerce site. And that non-catalog content, it might be rich imagery and video, of course. It might be detailed, kind of marketing-rich product descriptions that, you know, tell a story and try to engage you. Maybe it's personalized to engage people in different ways. And it might be non-product content altogether. So, for example, I was just looking at a bicycle shop that had an entire section on how-tos and communities and getting started and bicycling in your area and all that stuff, just to get people involved in the activity that they sell products for. So that's all good. There is every reason to add content to commerce, but it's really crucial to realize that this isn't only about improving commerce sites. that engagement um, um, uptick has to extend over the entire customer journey, from the initial consideration to post-purchase service to advocacy, regardless of whether the particular touch point within that journey includes a commerce element. So what I mean to say is that we shouldn't see Sitecore plus Commerceserver simply within the context of the two C's, content plus commerce, but rather within the broader consumer expectation of what we call the three C's, that is consistent, coherent, and contextually informed customer experiences across time and across touch points and channels.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to frame the whole thing, and I don't think that either parties would disagree with that. So I think it's a great framing. And frankly, they could have used that in the headline. If we look at the press release that Sitecore released, it was a kind of typical, in my opinion, marketing spin on something that I think they went a little above the top. They talk about, quote unquote, the acquisition lays the foundation for the industry's first .NET-based enterprise-grade customer experience management platform with a native, fully integrated e-commerce engine. And I think, Tim, as we were talking about before this, I don't think it's a great thing for them to go and say that this is the industry's first .NET-based CXM platform with a commerce thing, because certainly there are plenty of others. Bridgeline has iApps. That's certainly a .NET-based CXM suite. Episerver, they acquired MediaTaste back about 18 months ago. Kentico has a commerce module in it. All of those are certainly considered by many. I don't love the term CXM suite, but they certainly fit the bill. So I think what the shot maybe that they're making there is, as Sitecore tries to move itself up into the not tries, quite successfully, they're moving their way up into the larger enterprise play. They're basically dismissing those others as not being enterprise grade, which is the descriptor that they used there. And you wrote something actually not very long ago about this whole notion of enterprise and the use of the label and what that tends to connote. I mean, are we in agreement that the others are not necessarily enterprise grade? Maybe bring some of your recent blog post to this conversation here about enterprise.
Yeah. Yeah, I think rather we're in agreement that the others are not enterprise. In other words, we're not willing to accept the characterization of Sitecore as the sole enterprise level .NET proposition. And yeah, you're right. I did write. Actually, I wrote two papers. One about enterprise software solutions, and another about mid-market, specifically within the context of customer experience management. And very quickly there, the conclusion is or was that the distinction, calling something enterprise or non-enterprise, to stick with that that terminology, it doesn't make sense if you leave it to the vendors, because anything can be designated enterprise level, and anything usually is, frankly. And it can't be determined objectively by measuring the performance characteristics of the software and saying if you meet this level or you cross this bar, then you're enterprise level, because that kind of doesn't have anything to do with real world complex conditions, operating conditions. So really, the conclusion is that what is enterprise level is determined by the business requirements, and so enterprise level is simply that which has been tested and proven to deliver on complex enterprise requirements. In other words, finally, only use cases and more importantly, actually, references, customer references, can validate whether a given solution is enterprise level or correspondingly purpose-built for the mid-market. And in that case, you're undoubtedly going to be able to find some of those kinds of use cases for other vendors besides Sitecore. But it really comes down to determining what are precisely your requirements. Just because you're an enterprise level by over $1 billion revenue or something doesn't necessarily mean your requirements are enterprise. So you need to first of all determine what your requirements are, and then see what solutions have proven to be able to support those kinds of requirements in the past. And we can never overemphasize the value of customer references in making those decisions. So those considerations aside, right? Who's enterprise level and who isn't? Let's look more closely at the combination of Sitecore and Commerceserver. So, Commerceserver is mature and broadly functional commerce platform that plus, you can say .NET Commerce Platform, but it's a mature and broadly functional commerce platform. It's been around for a long time, as Scott, as you noted. But the fact is simply that it is not and has never been competitive with the leading solutions, the leaders now widely considered to be IBM, Hybris, now owned by SAP, and Oracle, right? And the latest wave and the latest Magic Quadrant, agree on this, and they're widely available.
So, and you're taking a shot at the notion of the leading e-commerce vendor.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Is it a leading? It is. It's leading probably in terms of the number of users that it has, like over 3,000, right? That kind of thing. But in terms of functional evaluations, it regularly falls into the lower parts of those evaluations, and that's just the fact. I mean, that's the way it is. There's no denying that, and I don't think anybody should try to hide that. But I think what's really important is, not the past or the present, but the future. And in Sitecore, Commerceserver has, I think, precisely the home that it needs, precisely the home that it's long been looking for. I mean, it was never well cared for at Microsoft. Since then, but it's only been a year or year and a half since Centium and now Smith acquired it. They've done some very important development and engineering on it. Most importantly, decoupling it from SharePoint, which is very, very important. But now, what's going to happen now? Where are we going to go with this? Well, in Sitecore, you've got, as you said, a very well thought of .NET CXM solution, and more importantly, from this context, you've got a proven legacy and ability to deliver on rapid development and engineering innovation. I think that's always impressed me about Sitecore since I've become an analyst, that they're very good at introducing new functionality and also keeping the existing core code up to date and refactoring it and so forth. What they do with a relatively small number of engineers is quite impressive. So now if you add Sitecore's development culture and proven expertise to the commerce-specific engineering skills that they're acquiring from Smith, because they're acquiring a whole bunch of engineers, not just the code, plus the incentive to create a big, broad .NET platform for CXM and commerce, all of that could mean and should mean that Commerceserver finally becomes a far more competitive proposition in terms of the Commerceserver marketplace.
Yeah, so all we basically had issue with so far is the marketing of this acquisition, right? I mean,
yeah, exactly.
It sounds like, you let the marketers get a hold of something and all of a sudden we've got problems, right? So all we've done is nitpick a couple of things that basically the marketing team put together in terms of putting out this press release. And I'm sure that the folks who do the heavier lifting over at both Sitecore and Commerceserver are cringing about that. But, regardless of that, let's talk about the nitty-gritty of this here, I think, and get into it. I mean, I'll talk a little bit about what I think from the Sitecore perspective. And by the way, you mentioned, what they do with their kind of, I think you said, relatively small number of developers. They actually have quite a large, R&D team. I think there's over 300 at Sitecore. They spend they put a lot of their money and time back into R&D, which is, I think, why they get the traction they get. I think your point about that they get so much traction is they get an awful lot back kind of per head, so to speak, per capita, right? I mean, you were at FatWire and explaining to me that when they were FatWire before it was acquired by Oracle back in the day, and you were saying that they used to just kind of beat you guys out of the gate, a lot of things, kind of developer for developer on a lot of stuff. So
exactly,
But I think so. So let's talk about from the Sitecore perspective and get past the marketing hubbub. I think this really fills a hole for them in the commerce space. But let's not even necessarily call it a hole, because I think as them who they're tending to sell against, right? Obviously, they're oftentimes in deals with the Adobes of the world, and maybe with SDLs and those. It's not like commerce is in every single stack right now, and they were missing a big, huge part. But it certainly is starting to be a trend here that we called about 2 years ago. This was going to start to happen and a lot more. But this notion of commerce coming together with content into that perspective, the framing that you talk about with customer experience as a broader backdrop for this. certainly it fills that hole, and it's a real opportunity here, I think, for them to improve what we see as a notoriously awful aspect of commerce. I mean, like, let's be real here. These commerce platforms are just awful to use from the actual user's perspective. I mean, entering in content is like you're in a system a la 1999. I mean, it's just really horrible. Barely any WYSIWYG capabilities. I mean, it's just really, frankly, a ridiculous experience. So not just for on the user side, but then also in terms of obviously what that does for the buyer side or the ultimate audience side, their clients. And that experience that, Sitecore is obviously known well for its ability to do personalized, and targeted content. And so now for them to be able to translate that over into the commerce experience is obviously huge. So the second thing, and this is a point that you mentioned, this notion of, I think what they really acquired here, and that's why I think the folks are cringing, because I actually don't think that they really thought we were buying this great big leading platform. I think they bought it because they got 3,000 customers, which essentially doubles, I mean, who knows what the overlap is, but what we know about Sitecore is they have also about 3,000 customers.
Yeah.
But so now they nearly double their customer base. They bring on a great team of developers. I think I've heard from Sitecore, I've heard from Sitecore that it's around 20 or so developers come over with it to add to their R&D group. A great background. They get a new, very experienced development team. Oh, by the way, up in Ottawa, Canada. So they've got, they gain a lot here. They also gain 25 partners in that ecosystem. So. Yeah. I think this is certainly a very good thing from their perspective, and I really don't believe that they viewed this as we're great at getting this amazing piece of commerce technology. In fact, an interesting point about this is that we haven't seen Sitecore grow by acquisition much in the past, right, Tim? I mean, they acquired like some print server capability or something not very long ago, or a couple years ago now, but for the most part, they've been able to make the claim that they were, natively built, purely grown from the ground up. So this will be one of the first times that we see them have to integrate another tool, and so I think here another module from someone else. And so I actually think that it's probably, if I'm going to put my rainbow glasses on, I'm going to say that it makes those R&D decisions easier when you're talking about integrating anywhere beyond the CSS layer. I think it's you've got to make a lot of decisions about who you use, and I think it'll be pretty much obvious. They're basically going to use this development team, and they're going to go rebuild a lot of this back in kind of in a much more native way than trying to string two pieces of things together. Yeah. But in that same light, there have been, I think, my understanding is that there's about 40 or so customers that are shared already to date. So we've actually already seen this integrated in a few places. Some examples of that: Jordan's Furniture. I actually used to live up in the Boston area in the U.S., and they're a very big very forward-looking marketing spin for them. Jordan's Furniture is one that they do. Commerce and Sitecore are already paired together on that, as well as Green Mountain Coffee. So those are, I think, a couple of good customer examples if you want to see how this can be done. And so for customers, I think obviously those who are on Sitecore, they can now, if they're thinking about their commerce needs down the road, they can certainly, maybe they want to hold up for this, I don't know, but I think they don't have to necessarily wait. I mean, one question to us came on the last round that we did this was, how long is this going to take? And who knows? I mean, that's the roadmap that Sitecore will release at some point, so we don't know when this is going to be there, but I think you can start to certainly integrate these two platforms today. And by the way, another point that we didn't discuss is, where does this leave some of Sitecore's other partners? So they used to go to market a lot with Insight Commerce. That's still an option for you, and there's plenty of examples of that in the market today. Active Commerce is another one actually built on the platform, and certainly you can go and integrate this. So I think it's great for customers. They're going to be able to have this kind of all-in-one suite down the road, but there's no need to necessarily wait today and hold up for that. There's a lot of ways that you can move forward, but I think it's good for down the road to look for this. So yeah. How about from I took a little extra time there, sorry about that, but what do you think about the Commerceserver side?
Yeah, no, and that's okay, because I think you covered a lot of the aspects basically apply to the Commerceserver side as well. I mean, if you think of it as Commerceserver, Commerceserver customers, there are over 3,000 of them. I think realistically, some percentage of those, and I'll bet it's not a small percentage, are small organizations that are still using very old versions of the Microsoft product, and are going to be meaningless for Sitecore. But still, big group, hundreds, if not into the thousands of customers that now have two basic benefits. One, as I said earlier, it should mean the end of a long period of relative neglect. I mean, not to downplay what Ascentium and Smith tried to do with the product, but like I said, they've only had it for less than 2 years, and potentially really seeing the heat turned up a lot. I mean, turned on basically, below the development efforts around this as a commerce platform. So that should be exciting for virtually any of the customers. And the other one is, of course, there's now there's an option, and there's also a motivation to take advantage of the Sitecore platform. So these, again, setting aside the mom and pop shops, some large percentage of those 3,000 customers have some kind of WCM now, and if history shows that it's no fun trying to integrate WCM and commerce at the individual user by user level. So to have any kind of integrated solution that Sitecore begins to deliver in the short term, and then gets more and more mature as time goes on, that's going to be attractive for Commerceserver customers.
Yeah, great. I think the fun part of this, as analysts sitting where we sit, is to talk about what this does to the competition, right? The implications on the competition for this. And I think that this really puts a fair amount of pressure on some of Sitecore's competitors like Adobe and SDL, who are now, frankly, the only ones left who tend to serve that kind of more complex scenario like you were talking about, or let's call it, for the sake of argument, enterprise. Those scenarios, certainly Adobe and SDL are serving them, and they do not have this in their package. So I think this starts to pit Sitecore into a lot of discussions now, maybe with the Oracles and IBMs who had these commerce capabilities. So they're going to find themselves some new competition now out of this. But I also think it puts them more in deals against the SAP, who acquired Hybris not so long ago. So it puts them, maybe pins them against Hybris a little bit more than they would have otherwise been before, certainly. I think what it also does, though, is it puts some of that, a little more pressure back as well on some of those larger stack vendors, that Oracle and the IBM. They're not exactly very well known for making these acquisitions and then stringing them together very well and integrating their solutions very cohesively, right? I mean, I think a lot of them liked to use for a long time this quote unquote best of breed as their label, yet they are looking awful sweet-like as they string these pieces together. So I think it puts a lot of pressure. What we know for sure is, and what I feel really strongly, Tim, and I think you feel the same, is that Sitecore will integrate this very closely. I mean, that's what they are, is a cohesive package. And so I think this puts the pressure back on the Oracle and IBMs, who have these fairly loosely integrated packages, if at all, in some cases not even at the CSS layer, to integrate their packages more thoroughly. I think it also pits them now. We see others in this space. This is, like I say, this is a fast-paced market, and the likes of Acquia, they have their commerce solution. So they're in this an awful lot more now. There are other players who are here that they're going to start to, now it's toe-to-toe. They've got a lot more kind of tit-for-tat capabilities to match up against. And I think it also puts pressure on the SAP Hybris, who I've been saying for 2 years that SAP was going to go buy one of these web content management vendors, and it was just a matter of time and who. I think they're obviously looking to jump into this kind of customer experience realm more with their acquisition of Hybris. I'm still waiting on who they're going to acquire. I mean, we know that they have a like relationship with both, open text. They go to market with them an awful lot from the content perspective, and even smaller players like eSpirit. But anyway, so I think they also really need to either go strongly to market with them or or buy their own content. So it puts pressure on them as well. What are they going to do with hybrid?
Yeah.
So how
Yeah, I
about
think
on the
that's
larger kind of ecosystem of space, this kind of CEM space that we talk about for you?
yeah. But one more note about the competitive landscape. I think you
Sure.
covered that pretty comprehensively. But specifically in the .NET context, as you noted at the beginning, EpiServer, Bridgeline Digital, Kentico, to probably a somewhat lesser extent than those two, they have integrated content commerce solutions today.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say that those are, aimed specifically at website e-commerce and not even trying to cover the broader commerce platform solution that Commerceserver tries to play in. Nevertheless, that's going to be that market for web-based e-commerce is going to be a very large part of the market that Sitecore is going after, and now they've got those. It kind of elevates the fight in the .NET realm in an interesting way, because it kind of validates the way that a company like EpiServer and BLD have been going to the market. A separate branch from what Sitecore's been doing.
And probably exactly the reason that marketing team did go and say that they're, essentially infer that
they're trying to create that distinction.
Right. It's great because they're trying to avoid that head-on fight.
They don't want to go into that ring. Yes, exactly. So in terms of the larger market space, very quickly, I think it's interesting because on the service provider level, so service provider is a term that we use to describe, whether it's a digital agency, a systems integrator, maybe even Marcom's firm, whoever comes to the table proposing to be able to help an organization, strategize and implement and operate a solution around customer experience management. So Sitecore, like many other vendors, several other vendors, has extremely large partner network. They basically, outsource virtually all of their professional services. And so there's a great opportunity here, but also a challenge for those established Sitecore partners to ramp up around commerce. It is a different skill set that they might not have in-house right now. On the other hand, they might have it, and they can begin to expand into that space. So as you noted, one of the Sitecore partners, I think it was Nonlinear, had a blog post out about how to effectively integrate Commerceserver and Sitecore within a couple of hours of the announcement of the acquisition. And that shows how eager the partner ecosystem is to develop this thing. And another aspect of this is that larger agencies, like global agencies that are have the resources and the breadth to really attack the notion of customer experience management today, this probably makes Sitecore more attractive to them, or more interesting if they weren't interested already, because you're adding more elements of the kind of comprehensive solution that can cover those 3 C's that we named earlier.
Yeah, so I think, like you say, I think it really puts our emphasis, if we want to talk about predictions and kind of the interesting points about this, and when we founded Digital Clarity Group, we were all about understanding that, look, technology is technology, and it's a really fun thing to go and watch for us, and we can help an awful lot of people find and choose the best technology for them, but that it's really deserves a lot of emphasis. It needs to be placed as well on those players, on those service providers, those agencies and integrators who make this stand up or fall down, frankly, right? Yeah. We do a lot of these selections, and oftentimes we're actually replacing very capable technologies that were really poorly implemented, and so clients are moving on from one to the next, not because this technology falls down, but because of the poor implementations. And so this really does put a lot more pressure on that ecosystem of service providers. And there's an awful lot of them that are out there now that are Sitecore ones that don't know a hoot about commerce, and so they need to learn, like you say. So I think that's a really interesting element of this, and it becomes more and more as this whole notion of customer experience and these suites span and start to cover an awful lot more ground. So that's a really interesting point from our perspective. I think let's talk about predictions for just a second. I think, for me, First of all, it was really interesting that Sitecore took on, I think it was about 2 years ago, maybe in 2011, they took a TCV, a well-known VC firm, took a minority stake, but a very large minority stake. I think I've heard as much as 49% or something in Sitecore. And I was always wondering what were they going to do with that influx in cash. And I thought, oh, maybe they're going to go a bunch of acquisitions, they're going to go IPO. None of that really happened until now. I don't think this was a result of that anyway either. So I still think they're sitting on that, and I wonder what they're going to do. And for me, I think the space is probably, I really think they have to figure out what to do with CRM in my mind. So I think it's an interesting, and we have Alan Bondi in our team, who's a well-known CRM analyst back from his Yankee days. I think the CRM is going to come into it an awful lot more. We talk about content being at the center of a lot of this, and certainly that's valid. But if we're going to talk about customer experience, certainly the system of record for holding a lot of that information about your customer is sitting in CRM systems, right? So deeper integration or acquisition of from one way or the other, I think, is certainly something we're going to see more of. I mean, Salesforce.com would like to see that. People try to compete with them on that, although I hardly consider them CRM. I see them more as Salesforce automation. But what do you think about that? You think that's valid?
I think it is valid, and for the sake of time, I'll give you my slogan about this, my bumper sticker, which is that, in the context of customer experience management, intelligence is going to increasingly be much, much more important than publishing.
Yep, and I think that's right.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that intelligence comes from current CRM solutions. I think they have a long, long ways to go to address CXM or to be the kind of foundation of CXM. But the intelligence also isn't inherently in a web content management system, which is primarily responsible for creation and publishing.
Yeah. One last interesting point is I know that Ryan and Wayne are the two executives that came over from Commerceserver. I think it'll be interesting to see what place Sitecore gives them in their organization. And I think I've heard, I believe that at least Wayne is likely to join the kind of product strategy team, which is a great place for him to be. I mean, they won't have that representation there, right? And Ryan will likely lead an R&D team. I think he comes over as the CTO. So maybe just the team that's in Ottawa there. But that'll be interesting to see how they kind of embrace them and embrace all of them. Because again, Sitecore's not used to these acquisitions. So let's see what happens.
Absolutely.
So I think that's it for us today. And I failed to mention that you can tweet about this at DCG Insight, hashtag DCG Insight if you'd like. Feel free to send us other questions afterward, or give us your thoughts just in general. But Tim, this was a great half hour. Thanks for doing it. I hope everyone enjoyed it.
Thanks, everyone.